go now to Mr. Lloyd. Go ahead,
you,
please.
Mr. Chair.
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming. We all witnessed the Mass Casualty Commission report come out, and the report seemed to echo a lot of the policies that your government has been promoting. But I would ask, Minister, in the case of the Portapique killer, how would a gun ban have prevented somebody who smuggled firearms and didn't have a license from possessing these firearms?
Well, I'm glad you raised the question. I think it allows me to explain the rationale of our policy. But before I do that, and if you'll permit, Mr. Lloyd, I would hope that we all join in expressing our condolences and support to the families of Portapique and Truro, some of whom I have met with, including people like Nick Beaton, who lost his wife, who was pregnant at the time.
Minister, we all grieve for the families, but Minister, I had a direct question for you. How would a gun ban have prevented the Portapique killer from accessing illegally smuggled firearms without a license? How would it have prevented him from having those firearms?
The short answer is that by putting in place a ban, we reduce the possibility and the likelihood of there being any of these types of firearms in our communities. And that's the difference, is that the Conservatives believe that by not having a ban, that somehow that translates into safer communities. The Conservatives, respectfully, are fundamentally wrong on that point.
Policies that actually take crime down and take criminals down, not policies that are virtue signaling, Minister. Given that the killer was in possession of illegal firearms without a license, I mean, how could a ban, if they're not being enforced, if the police who knew that the Portapique killer had access to illegal firearms weren't acting, how would a ban do anything to prevent criminals from accessing to firearms? There's currently bans from criminals possessing firearms in this country without a license as it is, and yet they continue to access firearms. Bans don't seem to be working, Minister. How do you think this new so-called ban on so-called assault-style firearms is going to be any different?
Mr. Lloyd, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I think it's quite revealing. The 2 points that I would say in response is, one, Mr. Lloyd, you refer to other practical steps. We put $450 million into the CBSA, into border security. Your party voted against those provisions. I've seen that technology at work. You're hearing about the progress of seizing illegal guns. But the other thing, Mr. Chair, is calling a national ban on assault-style firearms virtue signaling completely misses the mark and is disrespectful to every Canadian who has lost a loved one as a result of those firearms.
What is disrespectful to Canadians is putting forward divisive political policies that are only designed to help the Liberal Party win elections, instead of policies that will actually combat violent crime in our communities. That is what is disrespectful to victims. Canadians, especially gun-owning Canadians, are committed to supporting any legislation that will have a positive impact on reducing violence and gun crime in our streets. Legal gun owners in this country have a vested interest in ensuring that our streets are safe, because every time a gun crime is committed by a criminal in this country, it draws into suspicion the millions of legal firearms owners who have hunted peaceably, who have used their firearms peaceably from generation to generation. And yet every time a criminal commits a vile act, these millions of hunters, these millions of gun owners are demonized by your government. You've spoken of these nebulous special interest groups and their desire to have no laws whatsoever in this country. That is the kind of political rhetoric that gets in the way of us being able to have a responsible debate. There is no one serious in this country who is saying that we should have no firearms laws. There is no one serious in this country who is saying that we need to have Second Amendment-style American laws in this country. That is not the political consensus that Canadians expect, and yet we are led to believe by your government that these are real debates that are happening. These are not real debates that are happening. What the real debates that need to happen— Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, the truth of the matter is that it's not just this government who supports a national assault-style firearm ban and taking additional step. It's the Mass Casualty Commission. It's law enforcement, as you heard earlier from Mr. Schiffke. It's Canadians who've lost loved ones, and indeed it is the vast majority of Canadians. And that is what I have heard consistently. It's also from responsible gun owners with whom I have engaged with.
Well, that's not what we heard from groups like the Edmonton Police Association, we heard from the National Police Federation, who are saying that these so-called assault-style firearm bans are only going to divert resources away from the real action that is needed to get criminals off of our streets. And that is the action that we as Conservatives are committed to implementing so that we can ensure that these repeat violent offenders that seem to be getting out of jail in record numbers under your leadership, Minister, under your leadership, these criminals are getting back out on the street faster than ever in order to commit violent crimes over and over and over again. We need to stop the re-victimization of Canadians by liberal revolving door justice policies.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. The Minister may answer.
Well, if that were true, then I would certainly hope the next time the government puts an appropriation and a support for law enforcement at our borders and in our communities and for preventing crime, providing additional mental health supports, that the Conservatives will support it. But the fact of the matter is, historically to date, they have not.